Hello, and welcome to Trip the Beltway Fantastic. My name is Kelly Vlahos, and I am the editor-in-chief of Responsible Statecraft. My producer is Chris Leonard. And before we go anywhere, please, if you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe. We're trying to build our audience and beat the algorithm. We're also on Spotify and a host of non-video, audio platforms. So please like us there. Really appreciate it. I am so excited to be joined today by my friend Scott Horton. Scott is a longtime radio host and podcaster, director of the Libertarian Institute, editorial director of my favorite platform, antiwar.com, and the author of several best-selling books, including Enough Already, Fool's Errand, and his latest, Provoked. Thanks for joining us, Scott, and giving us the time today.
Thank you very much, Kelly. It's great to be with you.
Thanks. We've been doing radio shows together for at least 20 years, it seems like now, or at least since the mid-range of the Iraq War. So it's great to see your face. I'm sensing a whiff of desperation and almost deja vu as Trump's war against Iran is failing so spectacularly. Mark Levin is tweeting that the U.S. is just holding Israel back and is sidelining Israel at our say-so, quote, with pressure from the Arab states, Turkey, Pakistan, and others, because it has the will and the power to annihilate the Iranian regime. We're just holding it back. War party shills and neocons like Rebecca Heinrichs are slamming the ceasefire and the MOU, saying we gave Iranians money to replenish their weapons, which is a lie, and are cheering on the renewed military operations, which are in a pause now. And then you have Mark Thiessen, who is living in some fairyland in which he still believes Trump can topple the Iranian regime through a mix of dropping bombs and a popular uprising. Let's take a look at cut one, Chris.
Play devil's advocate, and some of these Democratic senators saying, we don't know the plan to end. Like, how do we end this? And they're saying they haven't laid out or heard a specific strategy.
I can give it to you right now.
Go ahead.
It's very simple.
Which is why I asked.
Okay, so we stop the fighting in the ceasefire on the 20-yard line. We take it into the end zone. We have about 14 days of combat where we have to take out all the targets that we have available. We took out 85% of their defense industrial base. We take out 95% of it. We set back all their programs, and we further entomb the nuclear dust. Then we stop major combat operations. We impose the blockade. We open up Cargill. We open up the Strait of Hormuz, and then we go and we help the Iranian people overthrow their regime the same way that the United States, we have muscle memory doing this. We liberated 400 million people during the Cold War without boots on the ground. We armed the Contras, we armed the Mujahideen, we armed UNITA Angola, we helped Solidarity, we helped Charter 77 in Czech Republic. We know how to bring down regimes without boots on the ground. We help the Iranian people. Trump has been tweeting out every day now for the last several days pictures of Iranians being executed by the regime. He's standing with the Iranian people. Let's help them overthrow their regime, weaken it militarily, and then help them do the job and finish it.
Wow. So like mix in all of those football metaphors and also hyperbole from folks like Will Chamberlain who continue to say that we have decimated Iran. And I don't know, Scott, I feel like we're back in 2005. I feel like these warmongers are getting a little desperate and they're getting a little hysterical. What do you think about all this current moment?
Well, look, as you know, and everyone in your audience knows, none of that is going to work. What he's trying to say is, trust me, I'm not saying put in ground troops. I'm really not saying that. I'm just saying we should do everything but that, including let's arm the Mujahideen against them if we can. No negative consequences we need to worry about from that or anything. No bin Ladenites running around the world killing people right now that we need to worry about. We just need to direct them against the Shiites in Persia. That's all. Same old story, really, for the last 20 years. If the U.S. government can forgive Al Qaeda for September 11th, then, maybe there's hope for us all. But anyway, look, otherwise, he's just making a bunch of magic wishes. Yeah. Because the part that he leaves unspoken there is the price that would have to be paid to make all of that stuff happen. And the truth is, if you're willing to lose a lot of Air Force and Navy planes, and if you're willing to lose thousands of special operators on the ground, and if you're willing to, essentially do everything you can to make a giant bet and risk breaking the entire back of the American empire on those mountains, well, the U.S. could inflict a hell of a lot more damage on Iran than they already have. We could, if we could send in enough troops to take out their anti-aircraft, that we could send our B-52s, we could carpet bomb Tehran like Nixon did North Vietnam, like that old footage where they're just pouring dumb bombs out of the belly of those things. We could do that.
Yeah.
Of course, there's still atomic bombs and hydrogen bombs, but that's the slippery slope that they've got themselves on, or that's the corner they've painted themselves into. That's what, I'm sorry, I forgot the exact quote, but you started with Mark Levin essentially implying the use of atomic weapons, that essentially we have to go all the way to finish this
We're
thing
holding Israel back.
Finish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have our active duty Army infantry force is about 500,000 men, and that's old data. I'm sure it's much smaller now. That was at the height of the Afghan surge, was about 500,000 men. So we would need to do a World War II level conscription effort, and then somehow make them all, our new 10 million man army, we'd have to make them all airborne and somehow drop them into Iran and try to conquer Tehran, which is approximately like picture Mexico City, right? It's a city of 10 million people. I mean, we're not doing that. There's no political capital in the world to do that. So how do you solve all these problems that these guys all claim must be solved through American violence? You can't, unless you're just willing to go ahead and make Tehran cease to exist. There is no way to put American boots on the ground there, control the new political government, parachute the monarch in there, the Shah. Nobody believes in that. Donald Trump doesn't believe in that. Mark Thiessen's best answer is, well, we just lay a permanent siege on them and then eventually they'll rise up and create a democracy. Remember how well that worked with Iraq when we blockaded them after the first Iraq war from bases in Saudi Arabia through the end of the 20th century, leading directly to the bin Ladenite war against the United States and then America's war throughout the Middle East ever since then? Anyway, yeah, Mark Thiessen's a fool, and anyone could tell, right? It's ridiculous. He cannot explain any of this without talking about football.
What's interesting about this is that in the Iraq War, when you and I used to talk about folks like this who would completely ignore reality and go before Congress and go on Fox News and write stories for the Weekly Standard or whatever, they would say the same thing. They basically ignore what you're seeing on the ground. We can do X, Y, Z. We could finish this off if we just have the stomach for the fight, if we surge more troops into the battlefield. I think what we're seeing now is a retread of that strategy. The big difference now is that we have new media and people can see with their own eyes what's going on. They have alternative analysis on social media and podcasts like this and yours and others. And Fox News, which is just showing its age, is just rolling out these old standards, these old guys like Thiessen and others, which I can't even believe they're still brought on as credible analysts, who are basically towing the same line. Unfortunately, in Iraq, it resulted in a protracted war that went on for 20 years. If you add in Afghanistan, I don't think it's going to work this time around. I think people are smarter. They see what's going on.
Sure. Well, and look, the Pentagon has told the president since the days of W. Bush, we don't want to do this because it ain't going to work. And Trump, there's a quote, Tucker Carlson in his morning email today has a quote out of the new Lindsey Graham documentary that they're leaking parts of it. And one of them is he's so excited. There's footage of him. He's so excited at the start of the war. And he's saying what's going to happen is after the first, few days of the war or weeks, they're going to lose control of the cities further away from Tehran, and those are going to fall into pro-American hands, and then more and more of the country is going to be liberated until it belongs to us. I mean, this just did not happen at all, right? The reason when Trump said nobody thought they were going to close the Strait of Hormuz, he didn't mean that no one thought that that was a risk. Come on, everybody knew that was a risk. But what he was trying to say there was he thought that that was belied by the fact that once the government ceases to exist after the first 36 hours or so of this war, then who's going to close the strait? Our new best friends that rise up to rule Tehran in our favor, which is this nonsense that the Israelis sold them. That was the entire premise of the war, was it's going to be easy. They had no plan for after that. And, you know, Mark Thiessen, by the way, for the young folk in the audience who don't remember, his major claim to fame back then was as a rationalist for Bush's torture program and saying it's not torture. And by the way, it is torture. And we definitely have to do it because what if we weren't torturing people? They might atomic bomb your city. And this whole ridiculous thing about the ticking time bomb and all of this stuff. That was his main thrust when he became a writer, was enhanced interrogation is the American way. That's who Mark Thiessen is. And, you know, my book was published right after the election in 2024, my latest book, Provoked. And at the end, when I'm predicting what's Trump 2 going to be like, I have a long section where I'm quoting Mark Thiessen saying, trust me, dog, I know this guy and we're going to war and he's a hawk and it's going to be great. And I'm paraphrasing very roughly there, but whatever. I'm citing Thiessen saying, America first, nothing. The empire rules under the new Donald Trump regime. Don't anyone worry about that. And so, you know, here we are.
Well, I mean, you know things are getting bad when the New York Times is reporting that the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, is warning Trump not to escalate because it would, quote, dangerously deplete interceptors available to the military central command. This is after Hegseth got all hot under the collar testifying that this wasn't the case. Chris, can we see cut 2?
It's been an astounding military success.
No, but are we winning the war?
Absolutely.
Okay, so do you call Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz winning?
The president has got himself and America stuck in the quagmire of another war in the Middle East.
Don't say I support the troops on one hand and then a 2-month mission is a quagmire. That's a false equivalation. Who are you cheering for here? Well, their nuclear facilities have been obliterated. Underground, they're buried, and we're watching them 24/7. So we know where any nuclear material
reclaiming
might be.
my time. We had to start this war, you just said, 60 days ago, because the nuclear weapon was an imminent threat. Now you're saying that it was completely obliterated?
They had not given up their nuclear ambitions.
One of our surviving soldiers told CBS, quote, painting a picture that one squeak through is a falsehood. So are you saying that these soldiers, our soldiers, who survived this horrific attack are lying?
What I'm saying is before the commencement of the conflict, we put in maximum defensive posture we could.
That's a direct
We moved
contradiction to
70.
what they said.
And this
So I thought I was giving you a cut from when he was insisting that we had enough missile interceptors to continue the war, and that all of these reports to the contrary were lies and hyperbole. We know that's not true, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of the back and forth there at the hearing. But, you know, Ben Shapiro is out there saying that the leakers to the New York Times should be tracked down and arrested regarding these depleted stockpiles. But we know that for years now that these stockpiles are running dry. I mean, CSIS came out with a report that said we had used like half of our Patriot missiles and THAAD interceptors in this war, and that the chief of naval operations testified before Congress in 2025, almost a year ago, that we had burned through our Standard Missile 3s at a, quote, alarming rate. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. What do you make of this? Like, and be free to, you know, just jump in on anything that he said, but it seems like they're, again, trying to deny reality in terms of like our continuing ability to wage this war in the Middle East while giving more weapons to Ukraine. At some point, we just can't do it anymore.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is the trade-off of having what they call these exquisite weapon systems rather than, oh, did I lose my video here? What happened?
You froze.
Well, can you still hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
That's funny. My camera's light started blinking blue instead of green.
Oh, well, you look great.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try to disable and re-enable it and see if that helps. I don't know.
Well, you sound great. So let's let it roll, and I'm sure your picture will come back.
Okay. And if not, you can just paste in a very handsome photo of me there or something.
You look very handsome
You
right
can
now. So.
find one. But no, listen, I was saying this is the trade-off for having exquisite weapons systems is, and really that's what they call them. But we all know that the premise of the American empire for the last, couple of generations has been that we're so far out ahead and no one can touch us. And so really the purpose of our weapon systems is not so much having the best weapon systems as it is figuring out how to extract the most money from the American taxpayer and from the Federal Reserve's printing press and, just take more for the people who are doing the manufacturing. The thing becomes, a self-licking ice cream cone or the cart before the horse kind of thing to such a degree for so long that then they really weren't counting on, well, geez, or I guess they weren't. Someone else was complaining. I'm sorry, I don't know who to give credit to, but somebody smart was complaining that, think of the dereliction of duty that over these generations, or whatever, the last 20, 30 years, that they have not covered American fighter jet bunkers in concrete throughout the Middle East throughout the Gulf. We don't have concrete shielded hangars at all in Saudi, Qatar, Bahrain, anywhere. They put nothing into this because the whole thing is a make-work program. It's a government program. And so when it comes to security, they don't care about us. They're busy patrolling the no-fly zone causing September 11th rather than patrolling American airspace preventing the damn thing. That's how the whole system works there. And then as far as the nuclear threat, Congressman, idiot there totally got him, right? Like Eddie Murphy at the end of Coming to America, where he's going to taste the soup. Aha! You say that you completely obliterated their nuclear program, huh? And that's also why we had to start this war was because you hadn't yet, and backed them into saying, well, but they still had ambitions. They still had ambitions after you completely buried Fordo and Natanz and took the Isfahan conversion facility totally offline and set them back clearly. I don't know anyone who would argue that last year, in June of 2025, that America did not set them back 10 years or something, significantly on their nuclear program, presuming they wanted to build it back up to what it was before. And so, yeah, that certainly does put the lie to the absolute. I think it's hard to even call it a lie, Kelly. It's such absurdity. It's like art. Oh, they were 2 weeks away. Donald Trump says with a straight face, which he says a lot of things, but this is literally his excuse, his casus belli for the war, is they were going to have atom bombs, or as he put, I think, an atom bomb in 2 weeks, and then they were going to use it against Israel, and then and the entire rest of the Middle East. They were going to use their one atom bomb against everybody.
Then they were going to put nukes in backpacks and unleash them on American cities.
Yeah, seriously.
According to Vance.
This is beyond absurd. Makes George W. Bush look like, or I don't know. It's hard to make that hard to finish that comparison well. But look, it's such the height of absurdity, and it just goes to show. Here's the Secretary of Defense, or whatever he calls himself, the leader of the Pentagon, has no legitimate excuse for this thing. And by the way, isn't it funny how it's just completely and entirely a technicality that this war is entirely illegal? The rule of law, whatever that is. The Constitution says only Congress can start a war. Of course, the president, as it says in there, or at least heavily implies in there, can defend the United States if we were attacked. But to start a war, you got to ask the legislature for permission first. And he did not do that. And then they literally passed the War Powers Resolution, and not the weasel kind like they did over Yemen, where they gave him the out where he had the right to veto it. They passed the veto-proof kind, the real kind. And then he just started the war back up anyway.
Yeah, he doesn't care.
And what is this?
I mean, most presidents don't care. I mean, that War Powers Act is a kind of a joke. It's a feel-good exercise, but no president has actually recognized the authority of it. They need to just pull the power of the purse.
Yeah, but ignoring its pseudo 60-day time limit, which is, written vaguely and whatever, but doesn't really authorize them to start a war. People read that wrong. Thomas Massey explains that very well. But even regarding the misinterpreted 60-day limit and breaking that, how about Congress, with veto-proof majorities, I guess, or no, I guess not. Oh, I guess they don't need one, right? The kind of resolution is they don't need the president to sign the thing or anything like that. He doesn't have the right to sign or veto it. He just is supposed to obey it. And they passed it. Both houses passed it, ordering him to stop. And to be in defiance of that is a whole other level of criminality. It's insane.
Yeah. Well, let's shift over to Laura Loomer, one of my favorite subjects. As you know, she visited Kyiv earlier this month, and after sitting with McDonald's in front of a blasted out Ukrainian apartment building, she said she had just experienced her first air raid in Ukraine. Sirens were blaring. This is every day for Ukrainians. This is all posted on X. I often said I don't care. Looking back, that wasn't very nice of me to say. We need to have moral clarity. Then she goes on to express support for more U.S. sanctions on Russia and said the Kremlin is a close ally of the Iranian regime. Quote, Russia is funding Iran and providing them with explosives to murder U.S. soldiers, as Iran has called for President Trump's assassination. She argued the United States needs to break Russia's economy until they submit to peace. Then, a week later, Zelensky's boasting that Ukraine just hit an Iranian merchant vessel in the Caspian Sea, and he's in Washington today, supposedly with evidence that Russia has been aiding targeting of U.S. military in the Iran war. And now everybody's talking about how this is sort of a ploy for broadening out the war, merging Ukraine and Iran, jamming Trump so that he both has to continue to fund the Ukraine war while putting us on some sort of World War I trajectory. Can you talk a little bit about what Laura Loomer is up to here, what Israel might be doing in the background? And is this like Zelensky's last pitch to basically lock us in and get us into a broader, more direct war with Russia? And I know he's saying something very important. Oh, yeah, Scott, you're muted. Well, I mean, I will just go on from there because I do think this is an important issue and emerging story. There's Scott.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Did you hear my question?
Yes, and none of that was my fault. God dang it! There's Israeli gremlins in my machine. It's the Russians, but it ain't me. That's the important part. It's somebody else's fault. Probably an inanimate object's fault. Yes, I did hear your question, and I'm very concerned, Kel, about what you're saying there. It's clearly a gambit by Zelensky to try to combine these two conflicts into one thing. You see, that's what Laura Loomer, her whole thing is Zionism there. So what's her problem with Russia? Russia backs Iran, and Iran is Israel's enemy. That's all that's going on there. But there's an article in the Wall Street Journal today, or maybe it was yesterday's. I think it's today's journal. Yeah, Donald Trump's warming up to good old Zelensky. He ain't so bad after all, because, they have to portray it all in personal terms. But in fact, Donald Trump can't remember what he ever objected to about the way things used to be. We're all Barack Obama now up there, I guess. And, well, hell, even Barack Obama, he overthrew the government in 2014, but then he was like, and he sent the CIA to help them start the war. But there were limits, right? Like, thank God he was too much of a coward to really go as far as Biden urged him to go back then.
Yeah.
And then Biden was the one who really blew up everything, of course, in his time. But, well, here, let me give the devil his due here, Kelly.
Okay.
For Trump to force Kiev, for Trump to force peace and end the war, he would essentially have to betray Ukraine, which, after all, they are the ones who have been invaded. And Laura Loomer's right. They're the ones who are, well, the Russians too now, but they're the ones who are getting bombed here. And so for Trump to just say, all right, well, I'm cutting off all support for you, and I demand that you give up all the territory you've already lost and whatever like that. I'm for that. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying, in Washington, D.C., that's a hell of a road to hoe, right? Politically, that's extremely difficult compared to, say, what he ought to be able to do in Israel, for example, call off the aggressor. Right here, we're talking about betraying the defender. And then the one that, yes, the previous administration, but yes, the United States of America helped get into this mess, right, in a terrible way. So politically, it makes it very difficult for him to just force Ukraine to just give them what they want, right? At the same time, he can't really threaten the Russians with any more than Biden and the Europeans and the Trump government are already giving Kiev this whole time. They got manpower problems anyway. There's no point in giving them weapons that they don't have enough men to even use on the battlefield and whatever. So we're giving them basically all that they need to continue to wage a defense as much as we can. And what carrot can Donald Trump offer Vladimir Putin that the next president can't just cancel?
Right,
so even if he says, look, we want to screw the Europeans, we'll just ignore them and go around them, go over their helmet here, and we will just go ahead and drop all sanctions and normalize relations, and I'll take you to the ball game, and we'll just be best friends again. Well, President AOC can just ruin that in 2 years. God help us all, right? So Moscow has no major incentive to go along with some positive promises from the United States there. They know that all of Washington, D.C. is still against them and that hasn't changed at all, right? So Trump has no good threat against Russia and no good promise he can make to them to get them to stop what they're doing, which is winning slowly, grinding up the Ukrainians and steadily taking more and more ground. And I just barely started to watch an episode of Willie OAM this morning, the great Australian war veteran, Afghan war vet, and battle map enthusiast. And he was talking about how the Ukrainians just lost another major town today or yesterday. So the Russians are advancing, but very slowly. And they are, by the map, they're far short of their goal. Now, of course, what they're trying to do, according to all the experts, is fight this war of attrition where they just grind up the Ukrainians and then they can walk around and go wherever they want. But they're surely not there yet. Wherever there is, we're 4.5 years into this thing and it's not over yet. So,
what about this gambit? Okay, so let's just say there is a deliberate, plot by Zelensky, perhaps even Israel. What does it mean? Is it that Zelensky senses that Trump is about to cut aid? There is some legislation or a letter was sent by Congress to Trump very recently, because saying that Trump has said that he's not going to issue the remaining aid that's already been locked in for Ukraine. He's sensing he's losing, Washington on this score. So by him saying, hey, we're your real partner. We're the Israel of Europe. We're with you all the way. And guess what? Your enemy is our enemy. And look, your enemy is getting assistance from our enemy. And so this is the gambit just to keep the United States assistance rolling, but at the risk of escalating the war in ways that maybe they're not anticipating. Because if they're already hitting Iranian ships in the Caspian Sea, what happens next if Iran just says, well, screw you, we really don't care because we've been taking hits for 6 months. We're going to send a ballistic missile your way, Mr. Zelensky. And then God knows where that hits if it doesn't hit its mark.
Right.
And
Well, I mostly agree with that, except that I think, and I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to there. I missed that story, but I don't think that aid to Ukraine is in jeopardy in Europe or the United States. There's too much at stake to keep the thing going from all the interested parties.
He wants a lot from Trump. He does want a lot. He wants
wanting
drones.
more.
He
Now,
wants the
that's another
Patriot
thing.
missile interceptors.
Right.
He wants
Yeah.
everything. So maybe if maybe this is a a ploy to just basically remind Trump that we're all in this together, and we'll help you get your guys if you help us get our guys.
In other words, the second part of what you're saying about the risk of escalation, I think that's the point itself, is to really try to make it two fronts in one war and try to get Trump to see it that way. Now, is he that easy to manipulate?
We don't know.
Like, he ought to be able to see what they're doing here.
And that keeps us going in Iran, which is what Israel wants. What's the Loomer connection? That's what I want to suss out here. Who's she getting paid by? I mean, honestly, what this whole flip-flop on Ukraine, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me unless it was part of some broader scheme.
Oh, I think I'm just totally guessing that the White House asked her to do it because they're the ones who are moving closer to Ukraine. She's with them. She's with them. She's Trump's girl. And so this is, help to normalize the change in the Trump position that now we're taking the Biden policy, and I like Zelensky after all, and we're going to keep backing Ukraine against Russia. And by the way, and this is all in the Wall Street Journal piece. I'm sure you're aware of this, and your audience is very aware that over the last few weeks, 6-8 weeks, I guess, we've had a pretty big propaganda campaign about how the tide has turned in the Ukraine war. And now they're so much better at fighting with drones and even, unmanned, little machine gun robots and these kinds of things, that the Russians' entire, strategy in the war is over and the tide has turned. And they're never usually quite brave enough to say that they're going to liberate every square inch of Ukraine right back to 1991 borders, like they used to try to say. But they do seem to think that the momentum now is with Zelensky. And I think there's some truth to advances in, the stories of Ukrainian advances in drones, at least in terms of quantities that they're able to turn out. And some of their tactics, although as Daniel Davis has advised, that's been the story of this whole war, but the Russians always give them a little while and they'll, counteract that with their own new strategies and whatever. It's not a static thing at all. But the point is that it's just enough. And, you remember this from the 2023 escalation, failed escalation in the South. And they said this, Wall Street Journal again. Well, the point of this is just to show the international community don't give up on us yet. Even though they knew it wasn't going to work. They were just driving their guys straight into, at best, a salient where they were going to end up getting crushed anyway. But at least it would give the allies a reason to say, well, they still got some fight in them, so we have to keep the thing going. And so it's the same kind of thing here. You have some advances in drones, but then you have a major advance in public relations. We need everybody beat this drum. Everything's changed. The drones have changed everything now, and so now there's something to believe in on the Ukrainian side, so go for it. Fareed Zakaria had a piece in the New York Times about this too. And, there's a lot of missing parts of their argument. It's just,
that's right.
It's going to work now. It wasn't before. I think it was Larry Johnson said on my show, you find me one person who's saying now that the tide is turning, who ever admitted before that the tide had been with the Russians until now. Show me one of those, and then I'll start entertaining your argument.
Well, I mean, I think this all goes back to our own capabilities and our stockpiles. So I'll grant you, okay, we're moving closer to Ukraine. We are breathing life into their war, and the expectation that perhaps they could turn the tide if they were just given a little bit more time. But we don't have the weapons to give them. We don't have the interceptors to give them. Now you could say, well, then Europe can give it to them. Well, guess where Europe was getting all of their weapons? Through this Pearl program from us. It was that sort of bait and switch where we said, well, we're not going to fund them anymore, but we'll fund them through Europe. Well, we're not giving them. We can't make them fast enough. So they can continue the war all they want, but at some point, they're going to run out of the things they need to defend themselves because we're running out of the things to defend ourselves. So, like, how is this, like, when is this reckoning going to happen? Because the war in Iran is not ending. Trump is digging in. The Iranians certainly are digging in. And so how could we possibly do both?
Well, I mean, kind of, though. I mean, what we did see a week of bombing. That's true. But those are the birth pangs of a new Middle East, Kelly, as Condoleezza Rice would say. Because, in fact, the MOU is still de facto on, even if it's going to be the worst sort of fits and starts. And because we got no choice, right? The same reason that Trump did not launch a massive escalation over the weekend is the same reason that he called ceasefire back on April the 8th. And that was, well, we hit a bunch of targets, but it didn't work.
Yep.
We can't, from just the air, destroy all of their missile capability. We tried our best, but granite is granite, and that's the world that we live in. And so, and it's just so widely dispersed through this mountainous country. There's just nothing that we can do about their missile stores. We failed to achieve our regime change, so we can, yes, bomb all their factories, bomb all their bridges, and bomb all their plants and all that. But that's not going to lead to a change in regime, right? It's like even the strategic bombing of Germany during World War II. Like, well, we keep hitting that railroad and we keep hitting that factory, but they keep rebuilding it and it keeps not making Hitler surrender. You know what I mean? It's the same thing here. I'm not calling the Iranians the Nazis, but I'm just saying you can only do so much with air power. It's not working. And they already told Donald Trump, there's only so much you can do with air power, and it's not working. And that was why he quit back on the 8th. That was right. Remember, he was threatening to exterminate their entire civilization, et cetera, et cetera. Was right when he threw in the towel back then. Then, remember, and they'll try to rewrite this, I guess, so we got to hold true to our recent memory here. He tried to run the blockade, and that was what started off the recent round of the war. Was he tried to drive some ships through closer to Oman, and the Iranians called his bluff on that. It was totally contrary to the agreement. They were enforcing the agreement, and that was the beginning of the mess up here. But then it led to a week of bombing raids where, yeah, what they do? They hit some targets. In fact, some of them, from the footage, they're hitting nothing, like these tiny little fuel depots or, you know, a truck or, you know, nothing. Maybe they hit a bridge or a couple of strategically important things. But on like the overall pie chart, you know, the scale of the Iranian regime's power over and control over Persia, they've made no difference there, right? That has not changed one iota. And so in the Journal and in the Times, it's again the military chiefs. It's the commander of CENTCOM or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who talked Trump out of this and tell him, Mr. President, there ain't no point in doing this. It's not going to work. We just got more guys killed, but we actually didn't accomplish anything. So now we can double and triple that. But we're just George W. Bush now. We're not getting anywhere with that if we do that. So that was why he quit. So I think it sucks because, well, here's the rock and the hard place, right? He lost the war, but he has no way to get out of it without looking like Joe Biden leaving Afghanistan.
He's in a box.
Humiliation, right? They're going to call him Barack Obama. And that was what, even Lindsey Graham said, oh, you just tell him that he'll look like Barack Obama and then he's clay in your hands, do whatever you say. And so he's just so afraid. And this is a problem with our system. You got to say, if we had a parliament, Kelly, we could just call no confidence and put a new guy in there whose fault this isn't and let him try to resolve it, Or if Trump would just step down and let the vice president try to negotiate a thing. I'm not saying I'm a huge partisan of the guy, but I'm just saying because of what us libertarians and, there's this whole thing called public choice theory, which is just the economics of politics, right? As Obi-Wan Kenobi would say. And all it means is that Trump's worried about himself. And, you know, the government will try to call itself America, the country, all they want, but it's not. It's the people with the power over the country. And Donald Trump, who made, in his words, he said, the foolish decision to start this war, now can't get out of it without looking like a jerk. And that's what it comes down to.
Right.
Is he can just say, okay, I'm a jerk. I shouldn't have done this. Boy, what a mess up that was. But that was the old me, and everything's going to be fine now. He can't just say that. And if he could, then everything would be much better, and we could really just call this whole thing off.
Right.
And pull back. Remember, Joe Kent said, don't even make a deal. Joe Kent said, just cut and run, man. Just cut and just, you know, turn around and come home from the region and ignore it. Forget the whole thing ever happened.
I agree with Joe, because the one complicating factor, the biggest complicating factor, is the Strait of Hormuz. And so he could sit there and be stubborn all he wants, but that means there's no traffic getting through. And that is going to hit this economy so hard. So if he really cares about, you know, his political survival, those midterms are coming down like a freight train. But moreover, if he actually gives a shit about Americans, like, he can't sit out there forever like a baby. He just can't, because that traffic needs to get through. And now the Houthis are like, you ain't coming through the Red Sea. So we're going to block you over here, which means like Suez. And then that whole African like route is all fraught in terms of costs. So yeah, like, he can sit out there all he wants because he's in a box, but it's going to really, really, really hurt his approval ratings.
Yeah.
And my you know, financial situation and your financial situation, because it's all gonna bleed down. It's already hurting people.
Yeah, and well, speaking of Mark Thiessen, right? This was there was a clip of him on Fox News saying, "Oh, boo-hoo, you can't stomach $4 a gallon gasoline. If we can't stomach that, then we're no longer a superpower." And it's like, yeah, but you're just saying that because that's the tiniest marginal percent of your income. There are other people who spend 100% of their income trying to survive, Mark Thiessen.
That's
who
right.
Don't get to be torture apologists for a living.
Right.
And
They have to
live
get
on
in their
Jeff
car
Bezos
and drive to work every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Where he's sitting on his ass in his pajamas on his keyboard fighting the wars.
Yeah, working for Bezos, right? Getting paid probably, let's just pretend and guess, somewhere in the very high hundreds of thousands of dollars a year at minimum to write this garbage.
And go on Fox News. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I see Chris coming on. I think we've run out of time, but I always enjoy talking with you, Scott. And I appreciate you're dealing with our tech situation.
Oh, no,
and
I'm sure.
I hope you'll come on again, and I'm sure we'll be meeting somewhere. But I appreciate all your insights. And I also wanted to note that you are doing an audio like version of Provoked, like you're releasing chapter by chapter, right?
Yes.
And people can just find that by just searching Provoked Scott Horton, and it pretty much comes up on YouTube. It's all on YouTube, right?
No, the audiobook sections right now are on my Substack subscription.
Okay, on your
only.
Substack.
ScottHortonShow.com. And I have H.W. Bush, Clinton, Bush, and Obama up there. And I'm almost finished editing Trump, but I still got to do Russiagate. And then I'll be putting Trump up there. And then, of course, there's Biden and the war. Coming soon. And I'm sorry, I know it's a couple years late, but I've had a lot of big projects, including the Scott Horton Academy and other things that I had to do first. But finally getting the audiobook out there for you.
Well, it's one of my favorite books of all time because it is a resource book. I mean, it is so heavily footnoted, the entire chronology of U.S.-Russian relations since the fall of the Soviet Union, that it is just like a must get and a must put on your shelf. So thank you, Scott, for all your hard work and everything that you contribute, and for being on the show. Trip the Beltway, fantastic.
Thank you, Kelly.